Today I'm going to show you how to make these teeny teen bikini bottoms. It's actually surprisingly easy. They're a companion piece to the teeny teen top, which has its own movie. Both pieces are for very slender teen and tween figures. I designed the bottoms to fit hips from 29 to 34. Because they're a string bikini style, we get about that much leeway. If you're designing for a more mature, curvier figure, you need the bare minimum bikini pattern instead. It has short rowing in the seat and the cups and a much wider size range, and that's found in the Oolala pattern book. These teeny teen top and bottom pieces have actually been added to the Oolala book, so if you already own it, you'll be getting a message offering you the opportunity to download an additional file, and all who buy the book from henceforth will receive the additional files automatically. There's a link in the program notes in case you want to buy the book. Note to mamas and grandmas, this is not intended to be a particularly modest suit. I'm going to give you exact measurements so you can decide if it will work on your girls and cover enough of them that you can stand to knit it. The front is 6 inches across the top and 5 inches straight down the length to the crotch. The length of the crotch going between the front and the back is 2 inches. And it is also 2 inches wide as knitted, but it will end up a little bit wider because we do add some trim. Width of the back at the top is 12 inches. Distance down to the crotch is 7. Those measurements don't include the casing, so there's a little bit more depth than stated. In the interests of full disclosure, I want to tell you I don't really have the proper dress form upon which to display a bikini. So here's what you're looking at. The dress form, in fact, only goes to the length shown at the dotted line on the left. That is the hip area, and it is only 27 inches in circumference. So the suit was really designed for hips a bit larger than these. What I did is draw in legs below where the suit really is on the form and matched the torso fabric as best I could with an editing program. That should help you visualize what it will look like on a real girl, but it is not actually on a real girl. They are different widths, but both the front and the back are basically this shape. We begin with a hung hem, work decreases down to the crotch, then knit a little straight piece. Use a sport weight yarn and adjust the stitch size so that you get 7 stitches, 10 rows per inch. That will give us a fairly firm fabric that's not see-through. However, if you expect it to get wet, you may want to line it by stitching t-shirt material on the inside. I'm actually using 3 thin strands of yarn that add up to a sport weight yarn when knitted together. That works fine for me. Cast on using the E-wrap and 42 needles. I am not going to go into specific technique details here. I'm going to assume you know E-wrap and other things. However, if you need help with any of those things, there will be some links in the program notes to take you to other videos. When the cast on is complete, knit 12 straight rows. By the way, stitch size 7 worked for me throughout the entire project to get the gauge stated. And you were seeing a trick I nearly always use. If I knit the first row or 2 back from hold, I very rarely have any jams or drop any stitches. Now we lift the E-wraps and hang the hem. I am only lifting every other one here. That's adequate to close the hem, but it's optional. You may lift every one if you prefer. I recommend using claw weights on each side. And now we'll knit 4 rows and work a full fashion decrease, another technique to which there will be some video links in case you don't know it. And we'll repeat, knitting 4 rows, then working a full fashion decrease until we have done so 8 times. Here comes my 8th full fashion decrease at 4 row intervals. Now we're going to do some at 3 row intervals. So knit 3 rows, work a full fashion decrease on each side 6 times. Here I am working my final decrease, These 50 rows complete the front triangle. At this point, you should have 14 working stitches remaining. As a matter of fact, in this clip I have 13. I had to go back and fix it later. Now we're going to knit the crotch 20 straight rows, change to some waste yarn, and scrap off. The casing at the top, the one where we made a hung hem, is eventually going to hold the string for the string bikini. Insert a knitting needle or something else long, slim, and strong into it and give it a lengthwise tug to set the stitches so that it looks as nice as it possibly can. Work the back very much like the front, but cast on 84 stitches, so many more stitches. Also knit the same kind of casing at the top, 12 rows, and hang the cast on to close the top hem, just as before. Here I'm showing you that you may use a tool if you would rather use that than flip it up with your fingertips the way I did last time. The first row after hanging the hem is likely to be a little stiff. You see that mine was. Make sure you get all the yarn tails out of the way so they don't get amongst the brushes. And after a couple rows, we can proceed easily. The shaping of the back is very, very easy. We knit 2 rows, work 1 full fashion decrease on each side, and we do so 35 times. So we're done at row 70. Here I'm working the last few decreases, and just as for the front crotch area, you should end up with 14 stitches after the final decrease. Now we're going to hang the front crotch area, the live stitches, on the same needles. It pays to use a strongly contrasting piece of waste yarn when we scrap off one piece, because you can see how easy it makes it to find the live stitches to hang. And you may pull out the waste yarn now or later. What we're doing here is creating double fabric in the crotch, and it's important to get your front piece oriented so that the pieces of fabric will be continuous. In other words, both knit sides will be out. So as you hang it with the fabric hanging down, you'll be looking at the knit side of the front, and that will make it continuous with the knit side of the back that we just knitted. Now we'll knit 20 rows on the 14 needles to create the 2-inch piece of crotch that will overlap with the 2-inch piece we knitted on the front. Eventually we'll baste the two together. Right now we'll just bind off the 14 crotch stitches. The front and back piece are now attached to one another. Part of the crotch is 2 layers and joined neatly right here. Now we'll sew the layers together. First of all, sew the bound off edge where it falls so that we have 2 layers in the crotch area. I think running stitch is as good as anything for this. Make sure you don't distort the fabric. I'm working through the bind off for neatness. This is way down where nobody ought to be getting a good look at it, so just as long as it's neat, it will be fine. Then along the sides of the 2 pieces of fabric, loosely whip stitch them together. We're going to need to work them together for the next step, hanging them on the knitting machine. So we don't want a lot of yarn in the way, but we also want them to stay together so that we can handle the 2 pieces as one. Now let's work worm trim around the entire leg opening. The panty back really wouldn't require anything. It does not roll much, but the front does because we decreased at a different pace. So with the purl side facing you and the knit side away, hang right beneath one hem on 3 needles, knit 6 rows, and repeat. Here I'm just weaving in the yarn tail so that it'll be easy to snip off later and I won't have to do anything else about it. Lift the next little section of edge, knit 6 rows, lift a section of edge, just lift it as it falls, no need to get picky, although experienced knitters know that you can actually get a little bit of shaping by either easing in or making these intervals as close as they can be made. Working down to the crotch is very easy. When we get there, we want to make sure to catch part of both layers of fabric when knitting the worm trim. So that's where the basting really helps us out. Expect that to be a little bit stiff, so knitting back from hold will make it a little bit easier than just hanging on the machine. I normally wait to weave in my ends until I've finished the entire piece, but this gives me such a good visual opportunity to show you how it works. I'm doing one now. Most of the yarn tails occur where there are doubled layers of fabric, so that allows us to just pull those tails between the layers and they disappear. When you finish the crotch area, the hard part is done. Just continue knitting 6 rows, then hanging the next little piece of edge. I like to work my hanging right next to the edge column of stitches. We have a complete edge column because we made full fashion decreases, and the doubled up stitches are on the second column from the edge, not on the very edge. When you get up near the top hem, knit the last logical 6-row segment. Then you'll want to hang the last little piece and bind off. Sometimes it doesn't want to work out absolutely perfectly, so you just fudge. Slightly adjust the closeness with which you hang the next piece of edge as you see the end approaching, so that you have room to hang that final segment. Then I like to knit 1 more row and bind off. It's just easier to bind off than having 2 sets of stitches on there and that lumpy piece of worm trim. Be sure to weave in all your yarn tails, and you can see now that our worm trim is completely stopping any tendency for the leg opening to roll. A string bikini has to have strings, so now we'll create one using mock I-cord. Cast on 3 stitches and knit to the girl's hip measurement plus enough for either 1 or 2 bows. You may have the cord go continuously through the 2 top casings and tie over 1 hip only, or you may have 2 cords, one going through the front, one going through the back, and a bow at each side. A bow takes about 8 inches from each cord. So if you only want 1 bow, you need the girl's hip measurement plus 16 inches. If you want 2, you need the girl's hip measurement plus 32 inches. No need to count rows, just knit and then periodically measure. Although this is really a piece of stockinette, you can see that it rolls so tightly as to emulate a cord just fine. When enough length has been knitted in the cord or cords, work a latch tool or a spare needle through all the stitches, snip the yarn, and pull the yarn tail through all the stitches. Then work the latch tool in and out the last couple inches of the cord, pull the yarn tail through, and at that point you can safely snip it off. You may also be able to reach all the way through the top casing of the front, grab the cord, and pull it through the casing that we made. It's unlikely that will work for the back, but it can be a shortcut for the front. Because the back is wider, we'll probably need to use a safety pin. Fasten it into one end of the cord and work the safety pin through the casing. Make sure all tails are woven in and neatly snipped off, and the bottoms are ready to wear. If you plan to actually go to the beach, I recommend trying them out in the bathtub first to make sure that you know how you're going to look. Some yarns behave just great once they get wet. Others will give you surprises, and who needs to share those surprises with the world? If you'd rather have the crotch seam in the back rather than the front, simply knit the back first, follow all other instructions as given, and it will automatically place the overlap where we stitch it down towards the back of the crotch double section.